I say about Metallica that hasn't been said already a million times? They've played on every continent, they've won 9 Grammys, peaked at 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, they've collaborated with tons of different musicians and other artists from Lou Reed to Darren Aronofsky. Their name is synonymous with metal music. I mean, it has the word metal in it. It's right there. But for many diehards, there was an unholy trilogy before they went on to become a commercial hard rock band. By the way, I disagree with this. I think Metallica is still very much a metal band, but I digress. The unholy trilogy is Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All. Today we're going to focus on what I consider to be one of the best Metallica releases of all time, Master of Puppets. Ooh, yeah! Sorry. I got excited. The title track sits at just under 1 billion streams on Spotify at the time of making this video, which is bananas if you consider this is a song from 1986. And I know Stranger Things had a lot to do with the resurgence of interest in this album, but I feel like that sort of downplays how special it was and continues to be for metalheads, especially for those that might be new to the genre. It's an excellent gateway album. Now, one of the interesting things for us gear nerds is all of these albums had similar-ish guitar tones. According to the lore, Ride the Lightning was tracked on a Jose modded Marshall. On Master of Puppets, they swapped this out, at least partially, we'll get into that later, for the higher gain Mesa Boogie Mark II C+. The Mark II had been around since 1978 and went through many modifications in its life, and the C+ model was considered to be the holy grail by many a gear connoisseur. Not only did it revoice the amplifier, but it also made it more aggressive. Now read into this however you want, but back in the 80s, there wasn't much in the way of high gain amplifiers, which is why many of the thrash and metal bands of the time opted for the Jose mod on their JCM 800s. I kind of view this departure with the 2C+ as Metallica finding their own sound, one that had a lot more gain. As a matter of fact, when they went to record the Black Album, a massive production, especially for the time, they had access to a plethora of amplifiers, but chose to use their tried and true Mesa Boogie Mark II C+s to record the rhythm guitars for its unique gain structure. It's something that had become sort of a staple of the band's sound at that point. Now, we could deep dive into this lore, and I would love to, but I want to get to the tone questing, and before I do, I just want to give credit where it's due. If you are into production, check out the Mixing Mastering online channel. Their videos are great, and watching the Master of Puppets production video is infinitely more enjoyable than trying to read through 𝒊𝒏𝒄𝒏𝒈 Rasmussen's chicken scratch notes. I tried. It's not great. So Sweetwater approached me about making a video doing some tone questing for the Master of Puppet tones, which sounded like a lot of fun. And my response was, "Aw, dude, I would love to check out one of the Mark II C+ reissue amplifiers," but they didn't have any. They're currently on back order. Real quick on the subject of Sweetwater, they have a new campaign on their social media that focuses on iconic albums and the gear behind the sound, and they asked me to help recreate the tones for the Master of Puppet album in the series. You can check it out in the link in the description of this video. Another fun fact, while I was making this video, I sort of went off the deep end just to see what I had around here that could give me a similar-ish tone, so I ended up shooting a bunch of extra footage that didn't make it into this video due to time constraints. If that is something you want to see, definitely let me know about it down in the comments. But I'm really glad it happened this way, because rather than just being an amp demo, it led me down this well-traveled rabbit hole that is the Master of Puppets production notes by 𝒊𝒏𝒄𝒏 Rasmussen, if I didn't say that already. A lot of people have used these notes to approximate a guitar tone similar to what they were using during that production. So I'm going to see what I have sitting around here that we can use to sort of replicate what they were doing. Let's start with guitars. That's the sexy part, right? At the time, Kirk was using a Randy Rhoads V with an EMG 81 in the bridge and an 85 in the neck, while James was using a white King V with Seymour Duncan Invaders. Okay, I know James Hetfield himself has said that he used the Explorer for most of the songs and that the white Jackson King V was only used on a couple of the songs, but I only had about a week to put this thing together, so if I say anything here that you feel is not accurate, feel free to actually me down in the comments. Luckily, there's this very beautiful mashup of those guitars that Jackson still makes, the Jackson Pro Series King V. It's basically the same white King V, but instead of the Invaders, it has an EMG 81 in the bridge and an 85 in the neck. Kind of the best of both worlds. And thanks to the �𝒏𝒄𝒏 Rasmussen notes, we know that they were using Mesa Boogie Mark II C+s slaved into a JCM 800. Well, the closest thing I have to a Mark II C+ amplifier is a Synergy module, but that's actually great because we only want the preamp sound, and since that's basically what a Synergy module is, it saves us the whole trouble of having to put an amp on a load box and feed the preamp out into the return of another amp. You know, it's just a lot of extra steps. Now, I also don't have a JCM 800. They're also pretty expensive to buy just for one video. But I do have a Marshall Origin. The Origin runs 2 EL34s in the power section at 50 watts compared to the JCM 800's 4 at 100 watts. But I think we're going to be in the ballpark here. Now, the part that I think most people don't talk enough about, and in my experience was really important when I was preparing for this video, is the cab. There's not much specific information about the cabs used on Master of Puppets other than the fact they were Marshall 4x12s. It's really hard to say what speakers were in those 4x12s, but they were most likely either Celestion G1260s, 65s, or G12T75s, depending on how old the cabinet was. Marshall started using the T75 in the 80s, and the whole point of the T75 was to make a speaker voice for the high gain amps that were becoming more and more popular at the time. So thank you, hair metal, regardless of what was being used, I think it's probably just better to go with a T75 loaded cab anyways. Now my Marshall cab has both T75s and creambacks in an X pattern, but we're going to close mic the T75s with an SM57, which was used on the production, and a small diaphragm condenser from AKG that I have. During the Master of Puppets production, they actually used a D&K 4006 on the center of one of the T75s, but that microphone is over $2,000 now, and the only other small diaphragm condenser that I have is this beat up AKG. Look, sometimes tone questing isn't about having all the same exact gear, but more making what you have work. We're also going to put an AKG C414 at a 45-degree angle about 4 feet away, which again is the closest mic that I have to the AKG 412 that was used from the Rasmussen notes. There's another caveat here that I need to address. So the Rasmussen notes also mention the use of a parametric EQ in the effects loop of the Marshall, an Aphex EQ F2. And I do have some solutions for that, but we're going to try something that I think is pretty similar to what probably most people have lying around, and that's a Boss GE7. All right, let's hook up all this gear and start diving in. What's up, everybody? I'm plugged into this Frankenstein of a rig, but that's okay. You know what I mean? We know through the Fleming Rasmussen notes that the Metallica rig was sort of a Frankenstein rig. So I feel like we're already kind of on par with it. Let me explain what's going on here a little bit. I am plugged into this noise suppressor, first of all, because this is very, very loud. And I would be feeding back if that wasn't on. So I don't know if that was part of the original signal chain, but I am plugged into a noise suppressor in this case. That is going into this Synergy module, this 2CP module, which very similar in layout to the Mark II C+. And I have this set as close as I could get it without having the dials with the numbers on it for the song Battery, which, if you'll notice, is a little bit different in tone from a lot of the other songs on the album. We'll get more into that as we go on. But then we go out of the 2CP module into this Boss equalizer. Now this is trying to recreate the out of production EQ that was used in the loop of the amplifiers during the time of the recording. We're going out of the equalizer into the effects return on this Marshall Oh, hey, this is probably going to happen a couple times in this video, but I just thought I should mention this real quick. The Marshall Origin 50, if you don't know, you can't just plug into the effects loop return, and I didn't explain this in the video, so I thought I should probably do that. You either need the foot switch, which mine didn't come with one. If you have the foot switch, great, but what you can do is you can just take a little headphone jack like this, a little stereo headphone jack, and then you go into this little white foot switch input, and you just plug that in, and that will activate your effects loop, and you can plug into the effects return and still have control of your master volume, and yeah. Good deal. And then all of that is going into one of the most important parts of this rig, in my opinion, is this Marshall cabinet. Again, trying to do my best to recreate the production of this guitar tone with the notes that are available. You know, it's kind of like a metalhead scavenger hunt. Now, I think this tone is mostly here. The one thing that is a little bit weird to me, and I think when you listen to the album, you can really hear this, specifically on Battery, there's this like boost to the high end. It's almost, it sounds to me like it's right around 3 to 4K, somewhere in there, but it's just really like aggressive. If you look at the notes, it says it's a boost to 4.5K. I don't have that on this equalizer pedal, so I'm kind of compensating by turning up both the 3.2 and 6.4K bands. This pedal's light is broken, I apologize. Let me show you what that does with it on. Off. It really does bring out the aggression and the pick attack and the and I think that's very important, specifically with this album, because there's so much right hand work going on. Like when you listen to Master of Puppets, you really hear all that. And that's really what's accentuated with this guitar tone to me, specifically with the equalizer pedal here. Now, another thing I'm probably gonna have to cut in while I'm editing this video, but I think another really underappreciated part of this signal chain is the cab and the miking configuration. Okay, so I have the project file from this video opened up in Logic here, and you can see I have the AKG small, the SM57, and then the AKG large, that's the C414. And then let's just solo them one at a time. I feel like it's super important and really adds a lot to the sound that you hear on the album. Yeah, I feel like just following these notes got us mostly there. I mean, this sounds... And to be 100% honest with you, I think the most valuable thing that you can take away from doing one of these tone quests on a tone like this is not necessarily the tone itself that you achieve, but it's just like how they got there, the way that they dialed in different things. Like, there's a lot to be learned here because, again, this is not something that I probably would have dialed on my own, you know? Yeah, man, it sounds super thrashy. Okay, the other tone that I want to go to right now, and the one that immediately follows this one on the album, is the Master of Puppets tone, because it's quite a bit different. So let's dial that in. We definitely arrived at a much darker tone, which tracks with how the album sounds. Let's turn the EQ off so we can take that out of the equation, just so you can see how dramatically that's affecting the tone. On. So not only is the EQ and the loop having a dramatic effect on this guitar tone, you know, the sliders on the actual preamp are having a pretty dramatic effect on it too. They're very, very powerful. You know, and an underlying thing here, and I really want to point this out, this guitar is actually having a dramatic impact on the way I'm playing, if I'm being honest with you. And this is a topic for another video another time, because I could really go off the deep end on this topic, and it sounds very conspiratorial, very tinfoil hatty of me to say this. I've had a lot of different conversations with different guitar players about this over the years, and you know, we all kind of like have different opinions on this, but I think we all kind of align on this idea that gear does matter, but not the way people think, not like in terms of sound and what you can get out of it. Like, that's important too, but there's also this like vibe aspect to gear that's really important to a lot of us. Or maybe that's just the reason we used to hoard so much of it. I don't know. You know, this guitar definitely makes me just want to kind of play Metallica. Okay, that was a lot of fun, and it gave me some perspective on my own guitar tones, honestly. Now, one of the more interesting things that I discovered during this process is that the exact gear might not be the biggest factor. In fact, some of the production techniques employed, I would argue, are just as important and carry just as much weight. I think we all know that the amp isn't where 100% of the tone comes from at this point, and in fact, it might play a much less significant role than we give it credit for, even though it is, in my opinion, the most fun part of the signal chain to tweak. What did you guys think? Was it close? Did you learn anything? Am I a huge poser for thinking the Black Album had better guitar tones? Let me know in the comments. Shout out to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video. If you liked it, be sure to hit the like button. If you really like what I do here, consider subscribing or being super cyan and joining these wonderful folks over here on Patreon. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.